I agree with you, just for what it's worth. But why would you say it's important to just get your foot into the market? So my guest today has a Master's of Business Administration, an Advanced Diploma in Financial Services, is the former Vice President of EFG Bank and Credit Suisse, is the winner of the MLC Best Medium Business Award, is the Managing Director of Integra Wealth Solutions. Jeff Noble, welcome to the potty.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Mate, I see you went to Deakin Uni, did you?
I could go back a little bit further. That's where I did my master's. I actually did my undergraduate overseas as well, and that's where I actually ended up with Credit Suisse. So I spent most of my life abroad before I came back to Australia and completed the master's.
Yeah, I saw that. So you were over in Singapore?
Started in the US, did my university studies there, was fortunate enough to get recruited out of school and spent a lot of time in the Cayman Islands in the Caribbean. So
really?
That was a little bit different.
I hear some shady things about the Cayman Islands.
Well, it's a funny story, right? Because this is back in the 1990s, and this is when they were obviously started clamping down all the drug dealers and that. But in all honesty, it was pretty clean and tidy. And to be honest, all we did was shuffle paper. There was no suitcases of cash showing up or anything like that. It is a tax haven, and it's an amazing place to see. They have, back then they had more fax machines and more PO boxes than people. So it's interesting, but it's certainly not what you see in the movies. It's a little bit more boring than that.
So a tax haven, and you can probably expand on this a little bit more, but a tax haven is basically where people or companies with quite a bit of money shift their profits overseas where there's less tax to pay. Is that right?
In simple terms, they'll incorporate companies in those jurisdictions. And look, they'll still invest in the US. They still invest all around the world. But because they're governed and taxed by that jurisdiction where there is no income tax, they don't have to pay any. And it's the same for individuals. So I didn't have to pay any income tax there. But you do pay it in indirect taxes, and that might be the cost of living, prices of food and rent and things like that. So it's just a different way of doing it. Yeah,
interesting. All right, so I guess just before we get into it, the reason I've got you on is obviously you've got a whole heap of financial planning experience, and for our clients, one of the biggest issues, and I think the issue for most people, is kind of learning how to manage money. So whilst you don't have direct property experience, and obviously our clients are first home buyers, so that's a lot of what we talk about. Why I thought it'd be really beneficial to have you on is so we can kind of talk about the basics of money and how to master your finances. But in doing that, you've got a whole heap of accreditations and whatnot that we went through at the start. So I think it's probably important to say that, anything that we're going through today is of a general nature, doesn't take into account people's circumstances. And really, I mean, this podcast, for anyone who's listened, shout out to my mum, is mostly for... it's just for information, a bit of entertainment. So, if you should get personal advice before you act on anything that we're saying today. Is that a good disclaimer?
No, absolutely. That's great. Thank you. You covered me off, and there's a lot to unpack there. Where do you start? Look, it's a journey, and I think it's just a learning experience. And the most important thing is to get yourself educated. Now, that doesn't matter. From my perspective, I'll go back a step, and I'm not going to look so much at the investments, be it property or be it shares. Let's go back and formulate some strategies. What are we trying to achieve? What are our goals? And it's never too early to start. That's the most important thing. Just thinking about where you want to get to, what you want to do, and be that in life or anything. And unfortunately, it's a bit of sacrifice along the way. So we want to live today because we may not be here tomorrow, but at the same time, we've got to think about our future.
Yeah, it reminds me of that. I think it's Alice in Wonderland where where Alice is talking, I think, to the cat who, in my version of Alice in Wonderland when I was a kid, she was smoking like a big cigarette thing, and she kind of comes to a fork in the road. I believe it's the cat. Anyway, we'll pretend it is. And she says to the cat, which way should I go? And he goes, well, it depends where you want to end up. And she's like, well, I don't quite know. He said, well, it doesn't really matter then, does it? And I've butchered that quote, but I really like it because... you've got to begin with the end in mind.
Yes.
And my experience of life has been when I set a goal at the start, I very rarely end up where I think I'm going to end up. But one thing that is absolutely guaranteed is I don't stay in the same place. And I've kind of lived my life to that ethos where I'm like, let's just point the ship in a direction, any direction, and start taking positive steps that way. And since I started doing that, my life has just been this crazy adventure of ups and downs and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so what were you doing in the US for school? Let's begin at the beginning.
So I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship and went and did my university studies there.
What sort of scholarship?
Well, academics, of course. I'm not an athlete, so that was, it was an amazing experience. And university in the US is so much more than about the academics because nearly everyone lives on campus, and that life is just amazing to participate in and be part of. So from there, I was very fortunate to get recruited from Credit Suisse, and they took me on a journey around the world, which was quite amazing. From the Cayman Islands, I ended up going to Brazil. So I went from a country of 30,000 people to a city of 20 million lunatics. So excuse any Brazilians listening, but
I think they'd be the first to admit there's a little bit of Latino fieriness in them.
So that was really a baptism of fire, but again, just one of those amazing experiences. And I think it's helped to make me who I am, and the knowledge that it's given me to go and live in other cultures and understand and just have those experiences. And as you mentioned earlier, I spent a lot of time in Singapore, again, working for banks there before we finally made the decision that we were going to come back to Australia. And the greatest thing from spending all that time overseas was knowing how great we have it here and to be able to come back here and raise a family. So we're pretty spoiled.
What are some of the biggest contrasts you saw between either Brazilian life, American life, or Singapore life compared to what we have here? Like, what are some of the things you look back and you go, wow, they do that a lot better, or geez, we've got it so lucky, it's much better here? What are some of those things?
That's a really good question. Okay, so I think in the US it was the entrepreneurship. They were just committed and brave and tried things that worked. And that was, I say that from the clients and the people I've dealt with. The Cayman Islands is very similar. It's more laid back in the culture, and everybody's just on island time. So that's more relaxing. The interesting one is Brazil, and the culture and the tightness between the community and the families. Unfortunately, we here at home, go home after work and close the door and turn the TVs on. In that Latin culture, and it's not just Brazil, but I think all across Latin America, they go home, hang out in the street and talk to their neighbors and friends. And that was, really nice to see and be part of. I've
got a friend called Juan, and Juan is originally from Colombia, but he's lived all over South America. And he's one of my really good mates. But what he taught me, which kind of lends to what you're saying, is he taught me how to love your friends like they're your family. And I remember he actually says to you, like, we hang up the phone, and it's like hanging up the phone with a girlfriend. He's like, okay, love you, mate. Yeah. And I remember the first time he said it, I was so uncomfortable. I'm like, I feel the same way, but can't use that language.
I know, and it's really funny. Like, you walk in the office in the morning and you have to kiss the girls on the cheeks, shake hands and give a hug to all the guys, and it's intimidating when it first occurs. But then you after a while, it's second in nature, and it's really a nice, caring culture.
Yeah, so Juan's wife, Laura, so they live in Melbourne, and when I was living in Melbourne, we'd be out, and before we needed to leave, Laura would tell him half an hour earlier because he would need to go around and hug
Yes.
each individual person
Yes.
before he left somewhere. It was really beautiful, and I remember when we went through COVID in Melbourne, and were you up here for all of COVID?
Yes, I was very fortunate. I'm a Melbourne born and raised, but I was fortunate to be here on the Gold Coast.
So I did the first two lockdowns in Melbourne, and for anyone who was in Melbourne, like to the people up here, it is impossible to describe the hardship that people went through down there. But for the people who are in Melbourne, it's almost impossible to describe to them that it was just them who went through it. It wasn't going on anywhere else. But sorry, I digress. But I remember in Melbourne, so you're locked in your house, couldn't leave for more than an hour. And the biggest thing you lost, or the biggest thing I felt I lost, was my connection to other human beings. And I remember thinking, like, as soon as we get out of this, I'm becoming a hugger. I'm going to hug everyone. Yeah. Anyway, I don't do that because I'm too tough. But
Look, it's really funny. And I was talking to someone yesterday, and they worked for the Australian Embassy in Beijing during COVID, during the lockdowns. And
Wow.
even they were saying how difficult it was to get access to food and things. You know, they would go days where there was just some cabbage and things. So it was not, it was terrible to hear, but nice to understand and appreciate. And as you say, Melbourne's probably the only comparison I can make, I suppose.
yeah, I actually gave a speech about COVID to some people from the Gold Coast, and I was making the comparison between the two places, and I did it in numbers. And look, that's not to take away. Some people had a terrible experience, particularly if you're in like tourism business up here, like you got decimated. But just going like Melbourne, I forget the actual numbers, but it was like 236 days in lockdown, where Queensland had like 12. I think.
Yeah.
And everyone just went to the beach.
Exactly, yeah. So we have no idea of how difficult it was. We were truly spoilt for the experience, to be honest.
Yeah, so we've actually just we're in the throes of expanding into Melbourne at the moment. So for you wouldn't know, and for the listeners, we originally began in Brisbane and Melbourne, and then obviously had to shut up shop during the COVID period and moved all the operations up here. And now we're in the middle of moving back there. And I think there's a fantastic opportunity in Melbourne at the moment where there's still a bit of a hangover from COVID. But if you've got the right approach, like if you can be the positive person, I think there's really good opportunity for people down there, first home buyers, there's lots of land. Anyway.
No, even for myself, from a personal perspective or a business perspective, I would have been better off in Melbourne as well. The opportunities are greater there, undoubtedly. I was a bit selfish and chose the lifestyle of the Gold Coast, I'm afraid. So, I still do a lot of work in Melbourne, and I love the place. It'll always be, my home.
Where'd you grow up in Melbourne?
Eastern suburbs, out near Knox, Baronia.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a great place to be raised as a kid. We were at the foothills of the Dandenong, so out in nature and living life. It's just the cold winters I don't miss.
Yeah, it's brutal. So I'm flying down every week at the moment, and I go from it's 23 degrees here, middle of winter, and I get down there and it's like 9, feels like 2, and it's just rough. There's some really redeeming features about Melbourne, but the weather for 95% of the year is not one of them.
No.
Okay, so where are we? We're overseas. You've worked for some major banks, and then did you meet your partner's Arnie? Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Did you guys meet overseas?
In Singapore. So she's Vietnamese heritage, and she went to Singapore to study. So we were both fortunate to go abroad and study. And she was actually working for ANZ Bank in Singapore and travelled to Australia regularly. And we made the decision: we're getting married. Where do we want to raise a family? And that was a no-brainer. We wanted to be back here, and I've never looked back. It's been a great experience.
How did you guys meet?
So, through friends, through in financial markets, so mutual friends.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a small world over there.
Yeah, it is. And that was one of the things. When I moved there was 4 million people there. When I left, it was over 5 million. So similar to what we're experiencing here in Australia at the moment, it just got so busy and crowded.
Yeah.
It was just nice to come here for the beautiful blue skies and the outdoor lifestyle that we have.
Yeah, I've got a friend of mine, Jenny, who is she's a scientist. She's a German scientist. You've never met a more German person in your life. But yeah, she does some incredible research. But she went to Singapore. She got a job. That's not the word for it, but we'll just call it a job over in Singapore.
Some research projects or something.
Yeah. And she was there for, I don't know, like maybe 3, 4, 5 years, something like that. And what she said was the working culture in Singapore is just out of control. Like people get up, they work all day, and that's it.
It's an amazing culture from that respect. And there's one blight on the education system because they do an amazing job. It's rated as, one of the most highly educated countries in the world. Mm-hmm. It's very efficient. I love living there because everything works. It's just so convenient and it's so easy. The work ethic is just brilliant. Now, you've got to look at that country and go, they don't have any resources. They don't have anything. What Lee Kuan Yew, the former leader, was able to build and create is, he turned it into the shipping center of the world for a number of years and has gone, we're going to make this a financial center and a services hub. And they've driven it amazingly. But we talk about culture and there's some funny things there. It's all about face, and you've got to be careful, but no one leaves until the boss leaves. At the office at night, everyone works till, the general office hours for us were 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. The boss might leave till 6:30, and then it comes down. So the lower you are, the later you leave, sort of thing. And if you drive a nicer car than your boss, well, you park it around the corner so no one sees it. So there's some different quirks, but total respect for what they've been able to achieve. And unfortunately, they're only the younger generation are learning to enjoy it and appreciate it. But it's been a challenge for them, but they've done amazingly well.
Oh, of course, tiny little island, and it's a financial powerhouse. So why did you pick finance?
Okay. For me, I was very fortunate. Growing up in Melbourne, you may have had the experience. I don't know if they do it today, but in year 10, we had the opportunity to go and do a work experience for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So me being the little smart-ass kid that I am, there wasn't a whole lot of options, and I was interested in the stock market. So walked up Collins Street, number 360, and walked into JB Weir and said, can I have a job? And
really?
Lo and behold, they gave me a job. So I spent 2 weeks on the stock exchange floor. Showing how old I am. This is back in the 80s.
Yeah.
I would run the text messages from the text machines out to the traders on the floor, and they'd do the buying and selling and that sort of thing. So that was my job for 2 weeks. So at 15 years of age, I'm looking around seeing all these grown men scream and cheer and chant, and I'm still figuring out what's going on, sort of thing. So it just enthralled me. And then I was fortunate in that, I asked if I could come back on some of my holidays after that as well. So over the next couple of years, I managed to spend, probably 3 months or 4 months of the time with those guys, just listening, hearing, talking, and understanding what they do. So it just developed a real passion for me and determined where I was going.
What about it were you passionate about?
Well, money. It's about money, making money, but the excitement and now the education, because every day I'm still learning new things. And, there's always something going on. There's lots of news flows that determine how market's going to go, how companies are going to go. So the excitement for me is now learning something new every day. And the best part of my job is saying to someone, look, you don't have to work anymore. You can retire. So it's taken me 30 years, but I really love the trust and the respect that I've gained from clients, and for me it's thoroughly rewarding.
It's interesting that you were there when you were 15. where you're like, yeah, got to make some money here. Because I think if I look back at my life, I wanted plenty of money when I was a kid, but I didn't actually want money. I just wanted to buy shit is what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I suppose my logic was if you're around money, there's got to be some money there to be made. So
yeah, great logic. Yeah, the other thing that I find interesting, and it just sort of reaffirms, I don't know, just what I think about the world is, you get a successful person. And there's a couple of things that I say. So the first thing is, if you want what someone else has got, if you do what they do, you will get something that approximates it. So, if you want money, look into the world of who's making money and then go and hit them up. But a lot of people don't, because they're worried, I don't know, if they'll get rejected or something like that. But the more success that I have in life, the more I realize that hungry, motivated people who've got a goal and a vision in their head, they're actually quite hard to come across. So,
and that's part of our society as well. Be it tall poppy syndrome, whatever you want to call it. It's hard work. It's scary and it's challenging. And look, for me, I've been fortunate. There's so many amazing people who've been successful out there. And I use Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. And I look at these people and I try and learn from them. I read everything that they write. I try to learn from their mistakes so I don't have to make them myself. But it's just having the courage and putting yourself out there. And I think where you've got to start is with a plan. And for me, it's simply, if it's not in writing, it's not real.
Yep.
And as you said before, like when I sit down with a client who's about to retire, I pull out this big chart of the last 30 years of where the stock market's gone. And I say, look, it's like a roller coaster. Life's like a roller coaster. It doesn't go in a straight line. We're all going to experience challenges. We're all going to have our highs, but it's that journey. And if we've got somewhere we're trying to get to, now that's going to change plenty of times along the way, but if we've got some direction, it helps us to get going and give us that motivation we require.
Yeah, it's funny. We pull out similar charts, but property charts, where we've got the
it's the same thing, right? Yeah.
Same thing over 30 or 50 years, because just pulling out a couple of things that you've said there and how it relates back to first home buyers. So the tall poppy syndrome, we actually have that with a lot of their clients, where they go, right, and for some of them, no one in their family has ever owned a home before. For others, obviously, people have. But they make the decision that they're going to do it, that they're going to try and purchase a home. And the thing that no one really expects is, in some cases, the people closest to you, mum, dad, uncle, are the people who are trying to hold them back the most.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you need to be careful of this, you need to be careful of that. And it's like at the exact moment when they need encouraging, hey, this is a really good thing that you're doing at that exact moment. And for all the right reasons, like their family or the people who are close to them care about them and they don't want them to get hurt. But at the exact moment when they need a positive push, they get this cut you down thing.
And you're right. I've had it in my own case, and my parents, they're not well educated, and they're almost like, why do you want to go to university? It's, you're 18, let's go and try and get a job and get started. But there's a lot more to it, and if you're not getting that support and encouragement, well, you've got to find other people who are going to give it to you.
Yeah, well, and this was one of the harder things that I had to learn. So I didn't make the decision that I wanted to be a responsible adult financially until I was like low 30s. So maybe 31, 32 is when I got really interested in money, and not really in money, just wanting to be independent, not be beholden to anyone else. That's really what my initial goal was. And I went where I think everyone goes to begin with, where I went initially to my folks. And they had some good ideas, but some of their ideas were not so great. It's not they weren't so great, it's just I didn't want to end up where they had ended up. And if I was going to emulate what they were doing, I would end up with pretty well the same thing. So I had to go out into the world and try and find those people, mentors, essentially.
Precisely. Yeah, that's exactly the word that comes to mind. You've got to find them in other sources if you can't. And look, we're fortunate now with the internet and all the information that's out there. There are great sources and resources that you can use. So it's just doing your research. And I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and having the confidence to hit people up, and this is sort of where this started, was for most successful people in whatever it is, and success might just be, hey, you got a shit hot house, how do I get that?
Yeah.
Or success might be something else, you own a great business, or you've got an amazing family life, like I wish I had a relationship like you do. But my experience is if you get someone who's nailed something that you want and you go up to them and say, hey, this is incredible what you've got, how did you do it? Most people I've approached are
I
open.
agree. Absolutely. And I always think the only dumb question is the unasked question. It's that simple. Don't be afraid, however silly it sounds. And I said this to a client the other day. Come and talk to me. Whatever harebrained scheme or idea you've got, let's just bounce it around and see if it's something that's achievable. So you've just got to put yourself out there.
Have you had some mentors in your life?
Yeah, I've had a lot over the years, and they've been, mostly employers or managers as such. But also some friends who've succeeded, and not just in financial markets or investments, in other fields as well, because everybody knows something. And I'm the first to admit I don't know everything. There's plenty I don't know, and it's nothing to be ashamed of to admit that. Just using the resources of other people. I think I've said it earlier. I like to learn from other people's mistakes so I don't have to make them.
Yeah.
Right. So that's almost more important than hearing about how, Joe succeeded. Let's ask him what endeavors he did before that didn't come to fruition and what he learned from those experiences.
Yeah. If you had your time over again, what would you do differently? Yeah. I read there's a book by Arnold Schwarzenegger called Total Recall. And I mean, it may not be for everyone, but for me, it was one of the greatest books I've ever read, because I found that he was so candid about his life. But his life was just like this fantasy life where it began with, his parents were essentially peasants in Austria. And then it went to, the highs of sport, business, politics, Hollywood, power, and then I'm me, so it had like a little bit of sex and drama, and it just
But how about the work ethic? It doesn't matter what one of those pursuits he was involved in. I've read stories of movie producers and directors saying no one worked harder on the marketing or getting out there on promoting movies. And we saw what he did in bodybuilding. He's gone into politics, everything he's been able to achieve. And I think his biggest thing, we all need a bit of luck to succeed, but that hard work and work ethic, you cannot fault that man.
Yeah, well, that's in his book. So obviously where he began is bodybuilding, and bodybuilding is about sets and reps. And then he applied that same thinking to everything. So there was a story in there where he gave a speech about global warming or whatever to a big international audience. And he said if you looked at the top of that sheet, you would see dashes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and he'd tick it off. He said you would see that I practiced that speech 63 times before I gave it, because if you do the reps, you're going to get there. And for a bloke who couldn't speak English, it's incredible. But what the point I was trying to get at with that was, that's right. What he says, even at the levels of success that he's got to, where, that guy, not only does he need to never work again, his kids, their kids, but what he said was whenever he would meet someone successful, he said, I'd always go and ask them how I did it, because I wanted to hear what their take was. And I really like that, because in life, there's like so many different ways to climb the mountain. But how did you go about it, and what can I glean from that?
Okay. Look, that's a tough thing to do. And that takes character, to go up and ask people what someone else thinks of them, because to take that criticism is not easy to do. So for me, look, it was having some great bosses, and I had one boss said, come to work Monday, Tuesday. I don't want to see you in the office on Wednesday. Just get out, spend the day with clients, because understand people. So we work, you and I both do, we work in a people business. And it's important, those people skills are not an easy thing to learn. It doesn't come naturally. I don't enjoy public speaking. It's not something that's easy to do. But again, it's just testing yourself and testing those boundaries and just putting yourself out there. So that, and doing the homework. I'll do research all day long, and at 10 o'clock at night before I go to bed, I'm reading what's happening in New York as the markets are open. So just informing yourself and using all the research. And a bit of luck helps, but a lot of hard work will get you a long way.
Yeah, well, if you're doing the hard work, it means when the luck comes along, you're in the position to take advantage of it. Because, obviously I accept that some people get a more difficult start in life than others. But I think everyone gets moments where, sliding doors moments where if you seized an opportunity, you could change your life. But if you're not mentally fit, then you'll miss it.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And look, we're very fortunate. We live in a land of opportunity. Australia is a great place. We've got education. We've got healthcare. We've got all the tools to equip ourselves. And it just comes back to self-motivation. And I understand it. I hate getting told no. I hate those difficult conversations. The more you have them, it doesn't mean the easier it gets, but it's just putting yourself out there.
I remember when I was a kid, I cannot stand being told no. And when I was a kid, I'd argue about it, and I'd get into so much trouble. And apparently it was a really bad trait, not being able to take no for an answer. And now I'm an adult and, I run my own business. It's actually a really good trait.
Yeah, it is. And it's, again, it comes back to those learning experiences, and be it with our parents and family. That's where it all begins.
So how would you, we're talking about setting goals and beginning with the end in mind. When you sit down with a client, and obviously your client's financial situation would differ somewhat from our clients, but I think the fundamentals would be the same. So what sort of things do you look at when you're setting goals and looking towards the future?
Okay, so just on that. So yes, a lot of my clients are older, close to retirement or retired, but now those relationships are well entrenched, and now their children are growing as well. So I'm getting more involved in just making sure that they're on the right path. And again, in all honesty, it's just about education. I want to put all the options on the table for them and say, these are things you need to think of. And look, I still think the great Australian dream to own your home is the most important goal. And
why do you think that?
Very simply, I don't want to see my clients as retirees out there renting, dealing with the current rental market. Can you imagine a poor old 80-year-old being told he's got to go and move because the landlord's going to sell the property and take the profit of the current environment? Who wants to deal with that environment? Because having that home gives you that security. You're not paying rent. You know you've got that place forever. And there are different things these days you can do to realize some of that equity. Reverse mortgages, Centrelink's pension loan scheme. So you can borrow money against your home and still remain there, and the estate cleans it up when you pass, sort of thing. So that great Australian dream is still alive and well for me. And it's where I start with my clients.
Yeah.
You bring in those younger ones. They might be the children of my existing clients. Well, priority is start saving for a deposit, because the biggest thing today, and again, I'm showing my age, the amount of deposit they need is what I paid for my first home.
Yeah.
100,000 plus is just terrifying. I never had that amount of money in the bank when I was younger. So to accumulate it's just a huge challenge.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, this is my life. Welcome. So when people go to get a loan, the bank essentially looks at three things. So they look at buyer, builder, block. But when they look at the buyer, again, they look at three things. So they look at deposit and costs, which is savings. They look at servicing, which is income versus expenses. And then they look at credit history, which is what it is. So if you were talking to one of your clients about savings, what advice, like one of your clients' kids, so people who are more in our demographic, what advice would you give to them around how to be financially responsible?
Well, look, we all started with next to nothing, right? Many of us are going for university. We've lived off that budget of having next to no money. It's just a matter of trying to find some balance, okay? We start work, we've got that full-time salary, okay? We've got to put a portion of it away. Okay, we've learnt to live without it already. We don't need to go and spend it. Be that 20%, be it 30%, whatever the amount is, depends on individual circumstances. But just come up with a plan on day one.
I talk to mostly my friends about this, but sometimes our clients. What happens when you earn more money? And I'm so guilty of this.
Me too.
Is you get lifestyle creep, right? So you earn a little bit more, maybe you go to a couple more nice restaurants. The more you earn,
the more you spend. It's human nature.
So there was a book that I read when I got really interested in trying to take care of myself financially, and it was called The Richest Man in Babylon. Do you know?
Okay, no, I don't.
Very old book. It's like maybe 1920s, and it's short, but it's a reasonably difficult read because it's got these and thous and stuff like that. But what it goes through is what it calls the immutable laws of money. I don't know. Laws of money, we'll just call it that.
Yes.
And one of the laws that it has in there is if you want to master money, you must pay yourself first. And that changed my life because as I earned more money, I just did better things. But at the end of the day, there was nothing left over. So and I think that's the way most people approach saving is they're like, I'll pay everyone else, and then if there's a little bit of money left over, I'll save it. But the problem is you've always got things that you can pay out. What this book taught me was it taught me when the money comes in, you immediately
quarantine it and put it aside. Absolutely.
Yeah, and do it. I did it anyway as a percentage.
And that's the trick, a percentage, because, and I'm just as guilty as you are. As we earn more, I spend more, but I can still put away that same percentage.
Yeah.
And that's what we should all be doing.
Yeah, and it gives you by doing it as a percentage, it gives you the encouragement to earn more because you still get to party with a percentage of it as well.
Yes.
But you're saving at the same time. But if you take that off the top first before anything else is paid, it becomes a habit and it becomes a priority. The other thing that I did as well was I looked at it and I can't remember what I was earning, but let's say I was earning 70 grand at the time. So we'll call that'd be roughly $1,400 a week. Now, $1,400 a week in your pocket, you probably end up with, I don't know, $1,100, something like that. But what I looked at it as, I went, well, hold on a second. No, I earned $1,400 and the tax office is just taking $300 of it. So I would take my percentage off the $1,400, which then as time went on, I'm like, well, hold on a second. How can I save some of this tax money? Like I treated the whole thing like it was my own.
Yeah. Look, can I give you a real life example for a moment?
Yeah.
When my daughter was born, I set up an investment bond for her. It's just a simple investment account. I just put $100 a month away. On the first of the month, that comes out and goes into this separate account. Now she's 11 years old. I'm up to $300 a month. I don't miss that. It comes out of the first day of the month before I start living for the month. So I don't miss it. It's gone. But by the time she's 18, I've built myself a protection fund of $100,000. So
by putting $100 a month
Well,
away.
I'm now up to $300 a month, okay?
Yep.
And that's probably 4 or 5 years I've been doing that much. But point being, small amounts over, a significant period of time do build up something. So by the time she's 18, I'll have my protection fund that I can help her with education or with a home or something like that. I think Albert Einstein said it the best. True true or not, he said the eighth wonder of the world is compound interest.
Yeah, and compound growth is such a hard concept to explain verbally. You can kind of see it when you look at a graph. I've actually got a graph of when I first started managing my money properly, and the graph legitimately starts off at negative 40 grand or something.
Yes.
And then, but you look at it between then and now, and when you look at the graph over all that time, it's like, let's say it's a 10-year graph. For 8 years, it was like nothing was happening. And then all of a sudden...
Absolutely. And that's the thing. This is the power of visuals, right? I can talk to you until I'm blue in the face and it might go straight over your head. But if we put real pictures in front of someone, can I try something for a moment? Can you make a V with your hands like that, right?
Like a peace sign.
Yep, just a peace sign. Now, can you put that on your cheek for me?
Yes, this almost looks like something vaguely sexual. Yeah.
Is that your cheek? That's your cheek.
Oh, I just copied you.
Do you know what? And the point being the power of visuals, right? I've only got to put some simple charts in front of someone.
So for the people who are just listening, not watching, what happened was I made like two fingers up, a peace sign with my hands, and then Jeff's like, now put the two fingers on your cheek, but I was watching him and he put the two fingers on his chin and I put the two fingers on my chin, not my cheek. The power of visuals.
Yeah, and it does make a big difference. And you need that longer term chart. As you said, that $100, it was $1,200 or $13 after 1 year. But if you make it the period of time, 10 years or 20 years, $100,000, that sounds like some real serious money, doesn't it?
And I think for people who are in the property market, you can see evidence of the compound effect looking backwards. So if I go back to when I was 18 years old, and there's a place in Melbourne called Point Cook where they were doing a land development. And I was like, I'm gonna buy a house. And I looked and I was like, you can get 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, double lock-up garage, big block of land for like 186 grand. And I went into work and I'm like, I'm going to buy one of these. And I remember the admin girl sat me down and she's like, Leigh, you are not buying one of those. But that was, I'm 42. So I'm 42 now. So that was the best part of 20 years ago. That same place now would be worth well over $1 million bucks. And that's the power of compound growth. And you can see it when you're looking backwards. But for what we do here, we try and explain to people that's what happened backwards, but it will happen again going forwards.
And it's the same if I might be talking about investments. It's like, well, I can't guarantee that we're going to repeat what we've done. I can't guarantee we're going to get that return going forward. The best guide I have is this is what's happened over the last 10 or 20 years. And then that's the most important thing. But then you can factor in, be it demographics, the population's growing. There's only so much land, isn't there? Then you've got, the uncontrollables with government and policy and things like that. Why worry about things you can't control? Yeah. Just focus on what you can control. And look, I think that's why a lot of younger people now are complaining about, how wealthy the baby boomers are. And it's because they had such amazing growth through the property market that they are financially secure and can retire comfortably.
Yeah, but they I gotta be careful not to boomer bash. I do a little bit of that. But fair play to the boomers. Fair play to the boomers in that they did buy property, and whilst it was easier, they went through some rough times. Like if you sit my uncle down and talk about property like every time, you don't understand, it was 18% interest rates.
I know. And there was only one parent working and it was a challenge. And I think every generation has their own challenge. Future generations, it's going to be something else, but we're all going to experience it and it's just life.
But I think my point was they overcame it and got into the market reasonably early, which I accept is challenging now, but it was challenging then too. But the thing is, now you're looking at the results of them getting into the market 30 years ago, and where they've held on to their homes, which is an asset, and it's worth a bomb.
Correct. They might have paid $20,000 for it, and it might be $2 million today.
Yeah, but we go, oh, that's unfair. But if you buy a house now for $600,000-700,000, your kids are going to be looking at your place in the future that'll be worth, I don't know, 10 or 20 mil. I'm just making numbers up, right? But it will be worth an unbelievable amount to them. It's like, well, if you want what they've got, you've got to do what they did.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And look, let's go back the generation before that. We're talking about our parents' generation, how secure they are now. Our grandparents' generation, they had to go through wars. World wars. The generation before that had to go through a Great Depression on top of that as well. So there's always going to be challenges. And I think speaking to people of those generations, sacrifice is the word that comes out. It's being committed, having a plan, and then trying to get started.
Yeah. So what are some of the sacrifices that you would see that your younger clients need to make in order to get to where they want to be?
They're going to hate me for it, but they have to sacrifice some of the lifestyle.
Yep.
And, I look at when I was growing up, I was fortunate to go overseas when I was 15. That was the only trip I took overseas, before I was 18. This younger generation, they're very fortunate that they're going overseas regularly. Maybe they should be doing that every second year instead of every year. Holding off on upgrading vehicles and things like that. We don't all need to live in a 4-bedroom house as our starter. I always think the most important thing is just get your foot in the market. Because if you're in the market, you can sustain some of the increases. So instead of...
Why would you... Sorry to cut you off. Why would you say it's important... I agree with you, just for what it's worth, but why would you say it's important to just get your foot into the market?
So you don't miss it, because as we talk about, prices continually appreciate. And I think if you're already in that market, you're going to gain some of that appreciation along the way, which is going to make it easier to make that next step.
100%. And I talk to clients about this all the time, where I'm like, what the property market, like the stock market for you, but the property market's kind of like an escalator, where if you take it over a long enough period of time, it's just slowly and steadily going up. The hardest bit for people is putting their first foot on the escalator.
Absolutely.
And then once you're on, things go up.
Correct.
Great. Your property's going up.
Correct. That's exactly right. You're gaining more equity to help you make that next move. And it's just a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. And look, I use this analogy with people, and it's similar to property, right? The share market. If I look at it on a daily basis, half the days it goes up, half the days it goes down. If I look at it on a yearly basis, 8 years in 10 it'll go up. 2 it might go down. But if you start talking in decades, there's only one decade in the last 100 years when it went down, and that was the Great Depression in the 1920s. And it's probably the same for property. The only time I could think of is maybe the 80s, when interest rates skyrocketed. That'd be the only decade where they may have gone down. And I look at some of these prices and what we saw 20 years ago. Where are they going to be in 20 years? So if I don't get my start as soon as possible, I might miss the boat.
Yeah, and I think at the moment, for the first time in most people's lives, be it boomers, my generation, the next one, I think for the first time in all of our lives, there is a very real risk that if people don't get into the market, we may have a huge percentage of the population which will be generational renters. And the flow-on effect of that is if your kids grow up in a rental property, the likelihood of them emulating exactly the same thing is very high. And it's hard to get into the property market at the moment, but it's not impossible.
No.
And I really like some of the things that you're saying where there is an element of sacrifice. Like we've got some clients who are like working on mine sites, earning good money, but they've got 150 grand cars. If you haven't got a house, it's up to you, but I don't think you should be... I wouldn't recommend driving a 150 grand car with a car loan on it until you've got your housing sorted out. For a lot of people, there's an element of sacrifice around where you live. I'll give you an example up here. So when I first started working in property, we were selling Pimpama, and Pimpama was 300 and something thousand, I think, 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 600 square meter block. And when we were selling that, people were like, this is the arse end of the earth. No one would ever want to live here. But you look at it now, and Pimpama Coomera is the dream. Like, now you've got to go further out again. But people are like, oh, I don't want to live in the suburb that's a little bit further out, which I get. It's and a change.
Pay a premium.
But if you go another 10 years, the one that you're saying no to now will be like Pimpama Coomera.
Yes.
But yeah, if you are prepared to make a little bit of sacrifice, a little bit of compromise, and to do what you said, which is just get yourself into the market, it then makes the pivoting to something else much easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we had a mate of mine, Tim Reed, who is a former athlete. That's probably not relevant to this story, but the point was he was not a property or finance expert. He was just a punter who came in because I really like him and he's good to talk to. But he was saying, his first house, he paid 600 grand for, but now he lives in a double-story place in Lennox Head, one street back from the beach. And all they've done is they've leveraged one into the next. So it took them 3 properties to get there. And now they're in something which is most people's end goal dream. But what people forget is there was that whole journey that happened beforehand. Yeah, and it's kind of like the graph, like the compound growth graph.
Well, and that's what it's about. It's about that journey, okay? We're at point A and we want to get to point B, but we want to have some fun and enjoy the ride. And as you said earlier, it doesn't go in a straight line. It'll take us to the fork of the road, but that's part of life, and that's what the adventure is about. So give yourself that security.
Do you guys own your house?
Yes, we do, fortunately.
Yeah, is that the first house you bought, the one you're in?
No, actually, first house I bought was in Melbourne. I'm just trying to remember, Yarraville.
Yarraville. What year?
That would have been 1997.
Interesting. So that would have been before, because Yarraville's quite gentrified now, and is.
It wasn't back then. It was close to the inner city and affordable.
Yeah, like I grew up in Ascot Vale in Melbourne when I was a junior burger because, Mum was a single mum. That's all she could afford. But she bought it on the same premise, it's close to the city. But it was the Bronx.
Yes.
Like I remember growing up seeing people stealing cars in the street, where now, like, Ascot Vale's not too bad.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a fairly wealthy sort of suburb now, isn't it?
So Yarraville, did you buy it on your own or with your partner?
No, on my own, and that was because I was living in the Cayman Islands, making good money, not paying tax, and the exchange rate was very beneficial. So I just wanted to get my foot in the market. I always thought Australia was going to be my home, and I thought it was going to be Melbourne. So I wanted to get started, and unfortunately, I never lived there. It was only ever an investment property.
Yeah.
But that I did sell it when we moved up here, and I think we sold it for about 600 and something at that time. That would have been 2011.
Okay. What would it be worth now, do you think?
Over $1 million, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's scary, that compound interest.
I used to work for a property investment company, and they would do like seminars and whatnot. And you'd have people talk about properties that they'd bought and sold. And quite often what they'd do is they say, add up the values of all the things you sold and what they'd be worth now and how much money have you done yourself out of. So you bought, your first property was an investment. My first property was an investment as well. How did you come to decide on Yarraville?
Good question. Pretty simple. I was living on the other side of the world, so I was relying on family and friends, but simple logic, affordable, that I could afford, and it was close to Melbourne CBD. The closer I could get that was a house rather than an apartment was where I wanted to be.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, if you want something that's going to go up in value, buy a block of land.
Yeah. Look, I had a grandmother who was living in South Yarra and I couldn't afford to buy over there. So same sort of distance from the city, and it was less than, probably a third of the price, I was going to say less than a half. So, yeah, look, that was great because it gave us a lot of security to get our home here when we moved to the Gold Coast. And as being self-employed, you know what it's like. You don't hit the ground running and pull out a big paycheck on day one. So it gave me the financial security to get into my home, and so I didn't have to draw an income for the first 2 years from the business. So it set me up for life, really.
So your first home purchase would have been a reasonably academic one?
Yeah, for me it was. It was, look, knowing that it was going to be an investment property, I'm not going in and saying, oh, this is not how I want it to be. It was just stock standard, not new, nothing fancy, but knowing it was going to be a rental property, it wasn't going to be destroyed. I wasn't worried about it being destroyed.
I had the same experience with my first property, which was also an investment. To this day, I've still got it, but to this day, I've literally never been inside it.
There you go.
Yeah, I actually should go inside it. It'd be kind of cool. But yeah, the closest I came was because I built a new property, and the closest I came to the house was after I bought it. It was in a different state, in Adelaide. And I flew over there, and I think I took a photo of the block, and I was there for like maybe 3 minutes, and then I left. That's all I've seen. And then the only other things I've seen is just pictures from the real estate agent. Where was the first house that you bought that you lived in?
That I lived in here on the Gold Coast.
And that was with your partner?
Yes, correct.
Had you guys had kids by then?
No, it was just the two of us.
Okay. Were kids on the cards?
Yes, absolutely. I think she was pregnant the year after we bought it. So
yeah, it's so funny. So I get this number wrong, and I could look it up, but it's something like 85% of our clients are a couple, either with kids or just about to have kids. And it seems to be the marker in life where you go, hold on a second, I got to start being responsible here. And then interestingly, the other 15% are mostly single tradies, weirdly.
who have disposable income and can afford it. But look, it's funny because we moved back from Singapore and I was very conscious about putting money into a property. I was concerned about getting the business started up and running. And I just rented a place and had signed a 6-month contract. And I'm thinking, I'll stay here for a year or two until I get the business sorted out. My wife arrived a month after me and said, nah, this ain't happening. We're buying a house. And that was it. And it's the greatest thing we've done from a financial perspective.
It's so funny in relationships because we deal with so many couples. To a T, every relationship, there is one person who is the driver, and it's quite often the lady of the relationship. Not always so. And you know, from the guys, we'll be getting. We'll just be getting a little bit of pushback. Oh, what about this? What about? And then you'll just eventually the wife will have had enough, and she'll say, we're getting this, be quiet.
Well, this is embarrassing to admit. And, you know, I manage people's life savings for a job, but at home, it's my wife who runs the finances. So I just do what I'm told and get my allowance and do the best I can with it.
You've been a good boy this week. Here's an extra 50. Buy yourself something nice. Okay, so house on the Gold Coast, thinking, I mean, very similar life situation to most people where want to start a family and not to put words in your mouth, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd assume what you were doing was you were wanting a secure base in which to really
to raise
grow.
a family. Yeah, absolutely. And we were fortunate. Like we stayed in that home for 6 years, and you know, business went well. We were able to bank more money, and then we were able to get into that forever home that we're in, and we've been in now for 7 years. And you know, I love it. It's my sanctuary. It's my escape from the world. Is my home.
Nice. So you went investment, principal place of residence, forever home.
Yep.
So that first principal place of residence, do you remember the emotional journey you went through buying that?
For me, it was relief more
Yeah.
than anything. It's like, yay, I'm finally in the market. I was a late start, or not so late, but I was in my late 20s, which compared to my friends who were getting married at 24 and 25 and getting that home, by the time I was 28 or 29, I felt like I was being left behind a bit. So the biggest thing for me was relief. You know, I didn't own it, of course, but I owned a chunk of it, and I knew and had a plan of how I was going to pay it out. So it was just truly relief that I'm in the market.
I get that. And I don't think people talk about this much, but there's this pressure, and I know I certainly felt it, where when you're in rental properties, it's almost like a nagging thing. So I had the voice inside my head, and I also had my mum, have you bought a house yet? Do you own a house? But it's like this pressure that you're doing something wrong and you're not adulting right because you don't own your own home. And I remember when I had my first place, and there's so many emotions that go into it. But yeah, part of it is definitely relief where you're like, I've finally done it. Yeah.
Call me an adult now. but you're right. There is that pressure. There's a stigma across society. It's like, okay, you finish school, go get a job. Now, next, find a home, get married, have children. That's just the society norm, isn't it? There's pressure on everyone. And in this day and age, with technology and this instant gratification, I think it's becoming even more and more challenging.
Yeah, it's a real problem. I don't know. Do you think it's the right way for... Do you think it's the right sort of pressure? Not to go all philosophical on you here.
It's hard, right? The biggest change from our grandparents' generation to our parents' generations, we're living much longer in life as well. So that's something we've got to think about. And if that means we're slower getting started, if it takes us longer before we get into our careers or we get into our homes, that's just life. That's just the way it is.
It's interesting. I often ponder. So I got the money thing mostly sorted out in my 30s, but yeah, I often ponder the get a wife, have kids, and I ponder if I'm missing that boat. I'm just like, but I'm really happy doing what I'm doing. But also, anyway, this isn't.
No. Well, look, my own circumstances. I was very fortunate to live in a number of different countries and live life. I was too selfish. Too selfish to get married. I was 39 before I got married. So
Yeah, right.
there was and even then it was.
How old are you now?
52.
Jeez, what's your skincare routine?
I don't know, but
I'm shocked. If you said to me you were 39 now, I'd go, oh yeah, probably drinks a little bit, but no, I'm joking. But you look really good for that age.
Thank you, but look, that's a common thing because whenever you're talking to people, associating or socializing with them, it's natural to think they're of a similar age.
You reckon?
Yeah, I do. Especially if you're talking about similar interests and things of that nature, you tend to think you're about the same age or similar ages.
I never would have thought that.
That's why when I hang out with 25-year-olds more, make me feel younger.
Okay, so then when you went into your second home, so your forever home in inverted commas.
Yes.
What was your situation then? Like you'd had kids?
Yes, correct. So it was just excitement. I'm walking around and going, I look at the cupboard. That's where I'm going to put the markers down. As my daughter gets taller, I'm going to be watching those things for the next 20 years. And just thinking of the memories that we're going to build in this home.
The markers on the wall. I had that when I was a kid.
So did I.
Yeah, but if you could encapsulate why you buy a home for your family, it would almost be a picture of the markers on the wall. It almost encapsulates the whole thing.
Yeah.
No,
it does. It, honestly, I think I said it. It's where our family's going to build our memories, and we're going to cherish every moment.
Yeah, that's actually our tagline, believe it or not. Building memories in a home you love.
There you go. I didn't even look that up before that.
If you did, you slid it in pretty well. Okay, so if you were, and we'll wrap this up shortly. So if you were to give one piece of advice to an aspiring first home buyer, what would it be?
Do your homework, educate yourself, talk to everyone and anyone who'll share their opinions, and inform yourself so that you can make an informed decision.
Interesting.
Because, and I think about this, it's the strategies of how am I going to save the money? It's where am I going to buy? What am I going to buy? What do I want to achieve?
I think I agree with that. Yeah, I was
going to say, tell me differently. What am I missing? Or
No. If you ask me, what would I say? I come at it more from a just do something point of view, because I think people's biggest problem is they get in their own way.
Procrastination.
Yeah. And everything's tomorrow, but tomorrow never comes.
And life's too short, right? It's a real journey, and it's great fun. Laugh, smile every day. That's what it's about. We're not here for a long time. We're here for a good time. Give ourselves some security of having that home, and then get out and, it's the experiences and the people that we take with us.
Talking about the education bit, though, I do agree with that. So I talk ad nauseum that buying a home is very hard at the moment, but it's not impossible. And the biggest thing that I believe is standing in the way is most people don't know what they can do to get in. So, for example, if you're in Southeast Queensland, at the moment, once this stamp duty concession goes through, if you've got access to all of the grants, which not everyone does, you can get into a property with... Don't quote me on this, but it's like 15 grand deposit.
Yeah. How brilliant's that?
But you've got to know what to do. And most people don't know what to do.
And you've got to understand what you're getting yourself into too as well. You've got to think of the risks. Interest rates, look what's happened in the last 2 years of where they've gone. And you spoke about it earlier. Interest rates went to 18%. Even during that period where they went up, they didn't go up by 4% in a year and a half as what we've just experienced. So you've got to prepare for those things as well.
Where can people find you if they want to find you?
integrawealth.com.au, same for Instagram and Facebook and everything else. So all the social medias, Integra Wealth.
Okay, perfect. Mate, thank you very much for taking the time in. It was taking the time to come in. It was really good to have a chat. Really good to get a very finance numbers based perspective on the home buying journey. It was good.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed it.